My name is Olivia Phan. I'm 28 years old, and up until last fall, I was the lead software engineer at a rising tech startup in Austin, Texas. And 3 months ago, my boss called me expendable. Right to my face, in front of the entire team. That's the word he used. Not underperforming, not overstretched, just expendable. Like I was some disposable battery in a drawer full of better ones. He leaned back in his overpriced ergonomic chair like he'd just dropped a mic. The conference room lights buzzed above us, fluorescent and unforgiving. Half the team looked up from their laptops just long enough to register the silence that followed. No one said anything, not even me. I sat there, blinking fingers curled tight under the table nails, digging half moons into my palms. My face burned, but I didn't let it twist. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Brad Maddox, the CEO, the visionary, the guy who couldn't write a line of Python if his VC funding depended on it, just smirked at me. "You're good, Olivia," he said, like he was doing me a favor, "but let's not pretend this place falls apart without you." He was wrong. Dead wrong. Because what Brad didn't know, what no one else in that room knew, was that I owned the core source code that kept the company alive. The entire neural prediction engine mine. I built it in my apartment 2 years before I even joined Cortex Edge, long before his pitch deck had more than 3 bullet points and a cheap logo. And the best part, he never got me to sign over the IP. I didn't always think like this. I'm not a power play kind of person. I was the quiet girl in every room growing up. First-generation Vietnamese American raised in Fresno, California, where ambition came in the form of working 2 jobs and never complaining. My parents didn't understand computers, but they understood effort. So when I told them I got into Berkeley on scholarship, they cried like someone had died. I guess in a way, someone had the version of me who would ever feel like she didn't deserve to be in the room. I graduated top of my class in computer science, interned at Tesla, rejected Google twice, and decided to take a risk, join a little-known AI startup in Texas that promised something different. Brad had vision. Or so I thought. He also had swagger slick hair and a habit of forgetting the names of women in meetings unless they were investors or someone's assistant. I learned quickly that Brad liked being surrounded by brilliance as long as it didn't threaten his spotlight. But I was hungry. I didn't care about politics. I cared about building, and I built. The problem was I didn't protect myself, not at first. By the time that meeting happened, the one where Brad humiliated me, the company had already changed. It had grown too fast, too loud, and the people who once respected me now avoided eye contact like I was contagious. It didn't help that I'd been speaking up. I'd flagged the lack of testing protocols, the rushed integrations, the half-baked models we were shoving into client demos. Brad didn't want truth. He wanted deliverables. He wanted speed. And he didn't like that I didn't play cheerleader anymore. So that morning he called a meeting to discuss performance restructuring, and somehow I ended up being the poster child for inefficiency, even though my code still powered over 80% of our product's core features. Even though the junior team couldn't even troubleshoot their way around one of my custom-built routing systems without Slack messaging me for help. Even though I hadn't taken a single sick day in over 2 years. I remember staring at the projector screen while he talked, half listening to phrases like, "New direction, lean team, reducing dependency on legacy code." Legacy. That's what they were calling my work now. Never mind that the code wasn't legacy. It was just misunderstood. Because no one else had taken the time to understand it, because I'd written it so precisely, so efficiently, that no one had ever needed to. Until now. Until Brad decided that perception mattered more than architecture. When the meeting ended, people filed out in silence. A few gave me the kind of glance you give someone who just got hit by a bus and might still be alive, but no one stopped. Not even Mia. Mia had been my closest friend at Cortex Edge. We joined the same week. Ate lunch together, pulled all-nighters debugging compiler issues on whiteboards and takeaway boxes. But lately she'd been cold, distant, aligning more with product vision and less with, well, me. I gathered my things, slowly pretending I had emails to send. Brad didn't even look at me. He just picked up his phone, probably texting someone about dinner plans or his next speaking gig. The man could manipulate investors with 2 adjectives and a blazer. I walked out of the room, My legs moved on autopilot, my ears buzzed, and still under all of that I smiled, just a little, because they had no idea what they'd just done. They thought they were pushing out a nuisance. They were about to realize they'd just locked themselves out of their own kingdom, and I wasn't about to hand over the keys. If you'd asked me 2 years ago whether I thought I'd ever be the problem in a tech company, I would have laughed and said no, I'm the one who solves problems. But maybe that was the issue. My name is Olivia Phan. I'm 28 now, but I started writing code when I was 11. I still remember the day I discovered HTML on my dad's ancient Dell desktop. I thought it was magic typing letters and watching entire layouts form on screen, like I was building worlds out of thin air. My parents didn't understand what I was doing, but they were proud. They'd come into the room with bowls of rice and whisper to each other in Vietnamese, like afraid they might break the spell. I wasn't the loudest. I wasn't the type to raise my hand in class or correct the professor. But when I coded, I was fearless, focused, borderline obsessive. That obsession earned me a full ride to UC Berkeley and then a 1-year AI fellowship in Boston. By 25, I had job offers from half the Fortune 500, and I turned them all down to chase a Risk Cortex Edge. It started with a cold email from Brad Maddox. Saw your neural mapping project brilliant work. I've got an idea. Let's build the future of predictive cognition. Think next-gen AI powered by trust and transparency. Let's chat. I should have known from the first sentence that anyone who name drops trust and transparency in the same line probably doesn't believe in either, but I was flattered. Flattered and naive. I joined Cortex Edge as employee number 6. There was no product yet, just Brad's charm, a loose pitch deck, and a second-hand espresso machine in a WeWork lobby, but I wasn't in it for the perks. I wanted to build something real, something useful, and I had just the thing, a proprietary neural architecture I'd been developing in school, something that could adapt to user behavior in real time without compromising privacy. I remember telling Brad about it over greasy tacos one night. He leaned forward, eyes wide, and said, "Olivia, this is it. This is what's going to put us on the map." He wasn't wrong. Within 6 months, our prototype built almost entirely from my framework got us $5 million in seed funding. Brad got the applause. I got the back end. At first, I didn't mind. I wasn't in it for fame or ego. I liked being the one behind the curtain making the whole show work, and Brad. He was charismatic, yes, but he also let me run things my way, at least early on. But something changed after Series A. We hired flashy growth guys from Meta-slid interns into senior titles, started calling everything agile even when it wasn't. And Brad started caring more about looking like a genius CEO than being one. He stopped inviting me to investor calls. He started referring to my architecture as our predictive engine instead of Olivia's model. And worst of all, he brought in a new VP of engineering, someone who didn't know Python from PowerPoint, and gave him final say on all technical decisions. That's when I started noticing small, deliberate cuts to my visibility. Bug reviews where my tickets were mysteriously unassigned. All-hands meetings where my contributions weren't mentioned even when they carried the sprint. Client demos using my features, but demoed by someone else. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just being paranoid. That being invisible was better than being wrong, that if I just kept delivering clean, fast, rock-solid code, I'd always be safe. But the truth was, I was becoming a threat. Brad didn't like that the company's most valuable product had my fingerprints all over it, and not just metaphorically. I still hosted the original architecture in a private GitHub repo under my own name, with full documentation, testing protocols, encryption layers, all mine. Back then, I hadn't transferred it officially because we were still iterating. There was a vague clause in my contract about work developed while employed, but nothing specific. In the original code, it predated my start date. It was my project. And Brad knew that, which is why I think he started moving against me. He started having other engineers audit my systems. Not to help, just to learn. The message was clear: we're trying to replace you. I remember one guy, Ethan, who was decent, but he didn't understand my logic trees. Spent 2 weeks trying to refactor one of my anomaly detection modules before quietly giving up. Another time, someone tried to optimize my feedback loop by flattening the entire matrix. The system buckled in 24 hours each time I fixed it. Quietly, without complaint. But they didn't thank me. Instead, they acted like I was being territorial. like I was hiding something, like I was a problem. That's when the whispers started. She's not a team player. She hoards knowledge. She's difficult. But the truth was, no one asked. No one asked how it worked. No one sat beside me the way Mia used to hungry to understand. They wanted shortcuts. They wanted my brain, but not me. I started feeling like a ghost in the company I helped build. And the worst part, Mia drifted away too. She was my friend. Not just at work, real friend. We shared Uber rides, swapped takeout, laughed about board meetings. But as the company shifted, so did she. I saw her aligning herself with Brad, more and more echoing his buzzwords in meetings, nodding along when he made jabs at legacy code and over-engineering. One night, over drinks, I asked her if everything was okay. She hesitated, then said quietly, "You're making it hard for people to trust you, Liv." I stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean?" She stirred her cocktail without looking at me. "You hold things too close. It makes people nervous. Like you're building something we can't touch." I wanted to scream. That was the point. I wasn't hiding, I was protecting. From lazy devs, from rushed decisions, from Brad. But to them, I wasn't a builder anymore. I was a liability. Looking back, I see now that the walls were already closing in. And I was still clinging to some twisted sense of loyalty. I thought my work would speak for me. But they'd already decided I didn't belong in the room anymore. And soon, I wouldn't even be allowed in the building. The day it started to unravel, there wasn't a dramatic blow-up. No shouting match, no slamming of laptops. Just a quiet calendar update titled Restructuring Strategy, Engineering Alignment Review. Translation, a small Cold War disguised as a business meeting. I walked into the glass-walled conference room 10 minutes early, laptop in hand, as always. Mia was already there, sitting beside Ethan, whispering over something on his screen. She didn't even glance up when I walked in. I sat across from them and opened my notes. I knew what this was. I could feel it like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Still, I had hope. Maybe they'd finally realized the platform was unstable without my direction. Maybe Brad would look at the latest performance metrics and finally admit that I wasn't the problem, I was the infrastructure. But then Brad walked in wearing that smirking, I've already decided face. "Let's keep this brief," he said, flipping open his tablet like a CEO in a Netflix drama. "We've been reviewing our engineering structure and there's some concern." He looked at me when he said it about bottlenecks. I blinked. "Bottlenecks." He nodded like I'd just confirmed his thesis. "Too many critical systems are funneled through one person. That's not scalable. We need to decentralize." Decentralize. There it was. I glanced around. Mia looked at her lap. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Even Ava, the new junior dev I'd trained myself, avoided me. "Are you suggesting I'm not collaborating?" I said slowly. "I'm saying the way things have been. It's not sustainable." He tapped his stylus. "Starting next week, we're redistributing ownership of the key modules across the broader team." I froze. The key modules. He meant the real-time feedback engine, the anomaly detection core, the adaptive threshold logic. He meant my code. I kept my voice level. "With respect, those systems are deeply interdependent. You can't just chop them up and hand them out like candy." Brad smiled like he was being patient. "That's exactly the kind of rigidity we need to move away from Olivia." I opened my mouth to push back, but then I saw it. The real reason I'd been brought here wasn't to give input. It was to be neutralized. They'd already made the decision. I was no longer seen as essential. I was the threat they needed to phase out quietly. Over the next few weeks, the redistribution began. Pieces of my code were handed off in messy blocks to people who barely understood their function. Ethan got the prediction matrix. Mia somehow was assigned the user adaptive module, one she once told me she could barely follow. Ava got the dynamic rerouting engine, which required an understanding of parallel processing that I knew she didn't yet have. No one asked me how anything worked. No documentation request, no walkthrough meetings, just lines of code taken apart and shoved into unfamiliar hands. I watched the repo commits like a doctor monitoring a patient's vitals. They were butchering it, stripping away safeguards, inserting half-baked shortcuts, commenting out error-handling blocks I'd spent weeks refining. In a Slack thread, I tried gently correcting an oversight Ethan made that was causing real-time lag in the dashboard. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Just. The next day, I was removed from the channel. I worked late every night double-checking their edits in the main branch, fixing what I could without being flagged. I wasn't doing it for them anymore. I was doing it for the users. The system's relying on my work to monitor hospital metrics, traffic flows, emergency response chains. Real people were affected by this, but eventually they locked me out of the production branch. Access control update, the system said. I messaged Brad. Hey, looks like I've lost commit access to prod. That has to be a mistake, right? He replied 10 minutes later. It's not. We need to reduce confusion during handoff. Confusion. I'd spent years bringing clarity to chaos, and now I was being called confusion. I stared at that message for a long time, hand hovering over the keyboard before I finally typed back, understood, but I didn't delete a single file from my local drive. I didn't shut down the backup repo I had created privately under my name, fully encrypted, timestamped with the original codebase that powered our core engine from day one. I hadn't stolen anything. The original work was mine, developed and documented long before I even signed with Cortex Edge. And that early contract I'd signed, it didn't assign intellectual property retroactively. Legally, ethically, and practically, I still owned the brain of their machine. I started documenting everything. Every edit, every bug, every place where the new team tripped over invisible wires they didn't know existed. I watched performance metrics decline. Clients started reporting glitches. One hospital flagged that their alerts weren't firing correctly, potentially delaying emergency interventions. I flagged it in our internal tracker. No one responded. I began to realize I was already invisible, present in name only. Then came the town hall. Brad stood in front of a sleek, branded backdrop talking about growth, scalability, and team resilience. He used phrases like cross-functional innovation and collaborative breakthroughs. He smiled wide and proud. And then he said it. Our recent improvements in adaptive AI routing were a true team effort led by Mia and Ethan with brilliant support from our junior team. My name didn't come up once. The rerouting engine, the adaptive AI that was my work, my math, my sleepless nights. I didn't cry, not there, not in front of all of them. I just smiled tightly and sipped my stale office coffee as if I didn't feel something inside me break in half. Mia caught my eye from the side of the room. She didn't look sorry. She looked relieved. And that's when I knew this wasn't about productivity. It was about erasure. They weren't trying to fix the system. They were trying to rewrite the story without me in it. But they'd made a mistake. They thought the code lived in their servers. They forgot that I carried it in my head and in my hands. And when they finally pushed me out for good, I wouldn't leave empty-handed. The night after the town hall, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of my Austin apartment, every sentence Brad said playing on loop in my head like a corrupted file. Led by Mia and Ethan, he'd said, like I was just a ghost in the machine. Like I hadn't architected the entire damn system from scratch. I felt rage sharp and hot eating through my ribs, but beneath that deeper was something worse, betrayal. Not from Brad, I expected that, but from Mia. She didn't even hesitate when he took credit for my work and handed it to her on a silver platter. Not a glance. Not a word. She just smiled and nodded and accepted the applause. For a long time I tried to give her grace. I thought maybe she was being manipulated. Maybe she didn't realize what was happening. But that night, something inside me hardened. She knew. They all knew. And none of them cared. The next week was a slow, humiliating death by omission. I was still technically employed, but barely. My calendar was a desert, no meetings, no reviews, no dev syncs. I was unassigned from every active sprint. Even internal emails about lunch orders stopped CCing me. The office felt colder, the fluorescent lights more artificial than usual. On Thursday, a box appeared on my desk without explanation. Brown cardboard taped poorly. I stared at it. It stared back. I didn't ask questions. I just started packing. What hurt the most wasn't leaving Cortex Edge. It was realizing I'd been erased before I even walked out the door. It was seeing my own lines of code appear in Slack threads stripped of context and logic and watching people celebrate them like new discoveries. It was watching Ethan present the updated dashboard at a client demo describing its core reactivity model like he'd invented it while the client applauded. I sat in the back of that Zoom call camera off mic muted staring at the screen like it might burst into flames if I stared hard enough. Then Brad chimed in, his voice syrupy and smug. This is exactly why decentralizing our codebase was the right move. We've reduced single-point failure and optimized team transparency. I almost choked. Single-point failure. No one in that room even understood the interdependencies. Without the core neural net syncing function, the one I built, those modules would start misfiring in less than a month. It was like watching a house being remodeled by people who didn't realize they were pulling out the load-bearing beams. And still, no one stopped them. Not Mia, not the board, not even the clients yet, because it hadn't broken. Not yet. But I could see the cracks forming and they were widening fast. The last straw came a week later. I was scrolling through LinkedIn half distracted when I saw Cortex Edge post a new blog update, How Our Team Rebuilt the Future of Adaptive AI, a breakdown of the innovation behind Cortex Edge's updated cognition engine led by Mia Collins, Ethan Wright, and Ava Thompson. No mention of me. Not a word. I read through it jaw clenched as they described rethinking outdated architectures and designing from the ground up. From the ground up, they were literally describing my structure line by line while claiming they had refactored it to meet the future. The worst part, Mia's byline, was at the top. I stared at her smiling headshot, then closed my laptop. I felt hollow, like the last thread of loyalty had finally snapped. Later that night I texted her. Not to fight, just to understand. Hey, can we talk? No response. I tried again the next morning. I just want to clear the air. I'm not angry, I just need to understand what's happening. Still nothing. On Friday, I saw her in the office kitchen. She was grabbing a La Croix from the fridge, chatting with Ethan about a client push. She saw me. Her eyes flicked up, then away. She didn't even pause. I walked over and said her name quietly. She stiffened. Hey. That LinkedIn post? I began. She shrugged. It wasn't my idea. You're listed as the lead engineer. I didn't write the post, she replied flatly. Did you correct it? She hesitated. It's not worth the drama, Liv. Let it go. Let it go. I took a deep breath, then stepped back. Okay, I said. I just wanted to be sure. She didn't say anything else, and I didn't wait around for more. That weekend, I pulled out my old hard drive, the one with my original neural framework, fully version-controlled, time-stamped, and logged long before I signed anything with Cortex Edge. It was mine, all of it, and now it was going to stay that way. I didn't want revenge, not really. What I wanted was recognition, respect, acknowledgement. But if they weren't going to give me that, then they could keep pretending to be brilliant until the lights went out. And when they came crawling back, I'd be the one holding the switch. 2 weeks after the town hall, my company email stopped working. No warning, no call, not even a formality. I refreshed the login page 3 times. Same error, access denied. Please contact administrator. I knew what it meant. They hadn't even told me I was fired. They just deleted me. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My tea had gone cold beside me. A small breeze from the open window ruffled the corner of a sticky note that still said, Next Sprint Fix Node Fallback for Sub-Second Fails. There wouldn't be a next sprint. I was out. And I hadn't even seen it coming because I'd been too loyal, too naive, too trusting. I should have protected myself better. I should have pushed harder when Brad started redistributing my work. I should have demanded a real contract amendment when my architecture became the backbone of the company, but back then I thought being indispensable meant I was safe. Turns out when people like Brad see something they can't control, they remove it. Not because you're weak, because they're afraid. I didn't tell anyone for the first few days. I didn't even call my parents. I just curled into myself. I let the blinds stay closed. I watched the light in my apartment dim from day to night and back again, barely moving. It wasn't just the job, it was the erasure. They took my name off my work. They took my seat at the table, and now they'd taken my voice entirely. I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter 3 days later. "Hey Olivia, we saw the Cortex Edge update. Sad to hear you're no longer there. Would love to chat about an opening at Metrica AI." No longer there. I blinked at the words. So that was it. It was official. My firing was now industry gossip. I didn't respond. Instead, I finally opened the private GitHub repo I'd kept locked away. There it was, Olivia Core v1.4. My entire architecture, fully documented, bulletproof, with logs stretching back to grad school when I first started sketching out behavioral neural patterns for my thesis. No one at Cortex Edge knew just how clean my records were. No one had bothered to ask. They thought I was hoarding information. The truth was, I'd been protecting them from themselves. And now it was just mine again. That should have comforted me, but instead it just made me feel more alone. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to sue. I just wanted what I'd earned: my name, my dignity, and the right to say I built this. But in tech, it doesn't work like that. Code is invisible to most people. And when you're a woman, especially a young woman of color, it's twice as easy to pretend your brilliance never happened. They'd wiped me clean, and the world believed them. The days blurred. My apartment grew quiet. I'd never had this much time before. Not in years. No Slack pings, no 2 a.m. server alarms, no Brad demanding a sprint preview before Monday. And yet, I felt no peace. I thought about reaching out to Mia again. I even wrote the message. "I'm hurt. I'm angry. But if there's anything left of our friendship, I'd still like to understand." But I never sent it. What was the point? She'd made her choice. Then one night, I found myself rewatching an old video, a lecture from Professor Donnelly, my AI ethics mentor from Berkeley. He was standing at the front of the auditorium, sleeves rolled up, waving his hands around like always. He was talking about intellectual ownership. What you create with your mind has weight. It has soul. It has value. Don't give that away because someone gives you a desk and a salary. Keep receipts. Keep ownership. I remembered that class. I was 21. Sitting in the second row, furiously scribbling notes, thinking I'd never have to worry about someone stealing my work. Now I was living it. I paused the video. Then I hit rewind and watched it again. That night, I didn't sleep, but not from anxiety. Something had shifted. I started digging through every contract I'd ever signed with Cortex Edge. The offer letter, the IP clause, the employee handbook, the NDA. At first, it all looked airtight, but then I noticed something. The IP clause had a timestamp May 2021, but I joined the company in June 2021. And the code, the original neural cognition engine, the foundational IP Cortex Edge was still running on, was built and uploaded to my private repo in April 2021, 2 full months earlier, and nowhere had I signed retroactive ownership rights. I sat back in my chair, breath-catching. It was mine. Legally. Verifiably. Undeniably. They didn't just push out the wrong person. They pushed out the person who held the key to their entire product. And I had the receipts. I opened a new document. At the top, I typed IP ownership analysis. Olivia Phan vs. Cortex Edge. For the first time in weeks, I felt something familiar stirring inside me. Not anger, not bitterness. Control. It's funny how grief doesn't always arrive like a wave. Sometimes it shows up like fog. I'd thought discovering that I still legally owned the source code would feel like power, and for a moment it did. But then Monday came, and I was still sitting in my apartment, alone. No job, no team, no one texting me for help, no alerts pinging me at 2 a.m. to save the system, just silence. My laptop sat closed on the kitchen table for 3 days. I didn't even look at it. I kept thinking, what's the point? Even if I had the legal high ground, even if I could prove ownership, what was I going to do? Sue them, launch a PR war against a well-funded startup with media-trained executives and shiny investor decks? I imagined Brad on stage at some tech summit laughing casually. We parted ways with an early engineer. Happens all the time. He'd wear that practiced grin, maybe toss in a fake compliment. We're grateful for the early work she did. They always make you sound like a ghost, like a girl who once walked through the halls but wasn't real enough to matter. The truth was, I wasn't built for battles. I was built to build. And for the first time since I was a teenager, I didn't want to build anything. I ignored texts. I left emails unread. I watched old nature documentaries I'd already seen. I ordered takeout and barely ate it. I spent a full hour standing in the produce aisle at H-E-B and left with nothing. The world outside felt too sharp, the one inside too dull. On Wednesday afternoon, my mom called. She never called in the middle of the week. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Con guy, she said gently. I saw your picture's not on that website anymore. The company one. What happened I hadn't told her. I'd hoped maybe they wouldn't notice. But mothers always notice. I swallowed hard. I'm not with them anymore, Mom. There was a long pause. They fired you. I don't know if it was firing. They just took me out of everything. Then my email stopped working. Her voice was soft but firm. You okay? I could have lied. But something cracked open. No, I whispered. I feel like I disappeared. Another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. You're not a job, Olivia. You're not code. You're my daughter. You're real and smart and strong. Don't let people who don't know how to build things tell you that you're invisible. I pressed the phone to my chest after she hung up. I cried like I hadn't in years. That night, I reopened my laptop. I didn't jump into action. I didn't fire off emails or start planning revenge. I just opened the files. My files. The ones I'd written line by line, logic by logic through heartbreak and imposter syndrome and cheap coffee-fueled nights. Each line was like a breadcrumb leading me back to myself. There, in the clean elegance of that neural logic tree, I remembered. This wasn't just code. This was my voice. And they hadn't taken it. They'd just tried to mute it. The next day, I walked to a coffee shop near UT Austin's campus and sat down with my old mentor, Professor Lillian Santos. She looked exactly the same oversized sweater, silver-streaked curls, and the kind of eyes that saw everything before you said a word. Olivia, she said, hugging me, you look like you've been through war. I laughed, but it came out brittle. I told her everything, the layoffs, the credit theft, the deleted email, the source code, even the private GitHub repo I'd protected like a secret diary. She listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "What you built isn't just technically impressive, it's strategic IP. You know what that means, right?" "I know," I said, staring at my chai. "I just don't know what to do with it." She tapped the table. "You don't need revenge. You need leverage." That word echoed. Leverage. You've got the legal standing, the time-stamped code, the documentation. What you need now is a plan. I nodded slowly. "But I don't want to destroy them." Lillian raised an eyebrow. "Who said anything about destruction?" When I left that coffee shop, the air felt different. I wasn't lighter, but I wasn't buried anymore. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Direction. That night, I sat down and built a clean version of my core engine modular portable and separate from the original Cortex Edge application. It took hours, but every moment felt like breathing again. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet, but I knew one thing. If they wanted to run without me, they'd have to do it without my mind. And if they wanted that back, it wasn't going to be on their terms. I started small, not out of fear, but out of precision. There's a unique satisfaction in building something deliberately knowing every step, every angle, every backup. It's the same satisfaction I felt when I first wrote the neural sync logic in a dingy studio apartment with secondhand furniture and a flickering desk lamp. This time, I wasn't building code. I was building leverage. Step 1, documentation. Not just the source code I already had that logged version controlled and backed up in 3 different places, including an offline SSD hidden in a shoebox beneath my winter scarves. No, what I needed now was contextual proof. Emails to Brad about architectural proposals. Slack messages where I warned about instability without layered redundancy. Meeting notes where I laid out the entire sync routing structure. Every date-stamped file conversation and commit. Every message that began with, "Hey, I noticed a flaw in..." I printed them all. Compiled them into binders, labeled them like a librarian who'd had her life stolen and wanted the world to know it. Then I cross-referenced the dates with the original repository commits April 2021, a full 2 months before my first official day at Cortex Edge. The original project's name, Aurora Mind, an early neural cognition framework I started for my master's thesis. The same logic that Cortex Edge built their product around without ever formally acquiring it. Legally, the foundation was mine. And now I had the receipts. Step 2. Legal clarity. I called in a favor from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Jordan Liu, a lawyer I met at a Berkeley tech ethics seminar. We'd stayed loosely connected through alumni groups. Olivia Phan, he said when I called. Didn't expect to hear from you. Let me guess IP trouble that obvious, I said. He chuckled. You wouldn't be calling if it was nothing. We met in a quiet corner booth of a Vietnamese cafe near downtown. He brought a legal pad and a quiet intensity that I immediately remembered why I trusted. I laid everything out. He didn't interrupt once, just kept writing. When I finished, he looked up and said, You've got a strong case. I raised an eyebrow. Strong enough to sue? He nodded. More than that, you could shut them down if you wanted. I didn't say anything for a moment. The idea hung in the air like static. I don't want to destroy them, I said. I want them to know they didn't win. And I want them to feel it. Jordan gave a small knowing smile. Then we don't start with court. We start with a letter. Step 3. The letter. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. It was clean, calm, powerful. Jordan's firm sent it directly to Cortex Edge's legal team and to Brad's personal inbox. It outlined my legal ownership of the pre-company codebase, the timeline of its development predating my employment, the modules currently in use that were built directly on my architecture, the lack of any signed IP transfer agreement relating to Aurora Mind. And then came the ask we request immediate removal of the IP or negotiate a licensing agreement with full attribution, appropriate compensation, and an official public correction of authorship across all company platforms. We gave them 5 business days. No threat of court, but the implication was clear we had them by the source code. I expected silence. What I got was panic. 2 days after the letter went out, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it ring out, but something told me to answer. Olivia. It was Brad. His voice was calm but tight. I'd like to talk. I leaned back in my chair. I bet you would. There was a pause. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd rather solve this quietly. You mean privately? I said, without anyone knowing what you took. I'm offering to fix it, he said quickly. Let's talk numbers. We're prepared to offer a generous settlement. I'm not interested in silence, Brad. I'm interested in being seen. Another pause. His voice dropped a notch. Look, you built amazing stuff, but you did it here, with our team. Don't burn this bridge. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You deleted my access. You erased my name. You had a junior engineer present my code and called it Rethinking Legacy. That bridge burned the second you decided I wasn't worth credit. Silence. Then he said, You'll be hearing from our lawyers. I smiled. Good. They already heard from mine. Step 4, the warning shot. Jordan leaked nothing, but someone did. 2 days later, a small blog post appeared on Medium from an anonymous contributor. Title, What Happens? When startups forget who built the machine. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. It was a quiet story told in elegant prose about a woman who wrote the foundation of a company and was erased from it, about how the company tried to rebuild without her and the system unsurprisingly began to collapse. The story spread. Quietly, among engineers, among founders, among VCs, and among clients. That's when the real pressure started. I got a text from Ava, quiet, anxious. Hey, have you seen what's happening in Slack Big? Clients are threatening to pull out. They say there are rumors we don't even own our own code. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. They were starting to realize the woman they made expendable wasn't gone. She just built something stronger. When the Medium story hit 100,000 views, it was like someone flipped a switch. Suddenly, the same people who had ghosted me were typing my name into every back-channel thread they could find. 3 ex-Cortex Edge engineers reached out in one day. 2 apologized. 1 asked if I was hiring. I wasn't yet, but the idea stayed with me. It started as a scribble in my notebook. Just 3 words: build it better. Not for revenge. Not to compete with Cortex Edge. To reclaim what I had built with integrity. To create something grounded in transparency. Real transparency, not the buzzword Brad threw around like glitter in a pitch deck. So I dusted off the Aurora Mind Core and began shaping it into something modular. Something that could scale not just in tech, but in trust. No venture capital. No move, fast break things. No performative diversity slides while silencing women of color behind the scenes. Just clean architecture, clear ethics, and human-first design. It felt like breathing again. Word started to spread quietly. A client I'd worked with during my Cortex Edge years reached out. He'd seen the Medium article, said he'd guessed it was me. "I knew something changed after you left," he said. "The system got dumber, more mechanical, less intuitive." He offered to beta test anything I built, said he missed the original brain. It stunned me, not the offer, the phrase original brain, because that's what they had tried to gut, and it was still mine. I named the new project Pulse Layer. I chose the name carefully. It referenced the emotional logic I had embedded deep in Aurora Mind's design, a layer that adapted not just to behavior, but to intention. Something that Cortex Edge never understood because they never asked why I wrote it that way, and Pulse Layer didn't need to compete with them. It simply needed to work. I filed the trademark, then I bought the domain pulselayer.ai. Within weeks, I had a basic prototype live, a stripped-down but powerful version of the adaptive AI engine, one that could be licensed easily by mid-sized systems with no in-house data science team. Think hospitals, municipal monitoring, crisis alert routing, things Cortex Edge had overpromised but never really delivered. Then came the phone call. Not from Brad, from his boss, the chair of the Cortex Edge board. Her name was Dana. I remembered her from the early Series A celebrations. She always wore bold glasses and said things like, "Diversity is a mindset," while nodding at the one woman in the room, me. "Olivia," she said smoothly. "We'd love to open a conversation." I smiled to myself. Is this about the letter or the blog? We'd like to avoid legal escalation. "I think there's a way we can repair this." "Repair," I echoed. Interesting word. "We're open to attributing the core framework to you, retroactively, perhaps a licensing agreement for existing clients. Would that satisfy you?" I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "What I want isn't a license." She paused. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to know what it feels like to negotiate with someone you called expendable." Another pause. Shorter this time. Then she said, "What would that negotiation look like?" I sent my terms through Jordan the next morning, full public acknowledgement that the Aurora Mind engine originated solely with me. Retroactive attribution on all Cortex Edge marketing tech blogs and client docs. A licensing fee for continued use paid quarterly. And one more thing, Cortex Edge would remove my framework entirely within 12 months and rebuild from scratch. Why? Because I didn't want them running my mind anymore. They could use it for now, but they would never again own the future I built. It took them 3 days to reply. They agreed to every term. When the announcement went live on TechCrunch, I got over 600 messages in 24 hours. Some were congratulations, some were apologies, and a few were silent LinkedIn requests from people who once whispered she's difficult. I accepted none of them. But one message did stand out. It was from Ava, the junior dev. "Hey, Olivia. I was scared to speak up back then. I'm sorry. I learned so much from you even when you weren't allowed in the room." That one made me pause. I replied, "Then make sure you speak up next time. For yourself. For someone else. Silence protects the wrong people." She hearted the message, and that was enough. Pulse Layer launched quietly, but grew fast. We didn't have VC dollars. We didn't have a polished founder in a blazer. But we had clarity, and clients noticed. By the end of Q1, we had our first licensing deal. By Q2, 3 more. And one morning over iced coffee and bug testing, I got a call from a friend at an industry analytics firm. "You'll never guess this," she said, laughing. Cortex Edge is now licensing software from PulseLayer. I nearly dropped my coffee. It was true. The company that called me expendable was now paying to rent my mind, and they were late on their first payment. I didn't expect to see him again. After everything, the letter, the licensing agreement, the public acknowledgement, I thought that chapter had closed. I'd imagined Brad slinking off into some other venture, licking his wounds, searching for another woman to build his next empire while he gave TEDx talks about failing forward. But one Friday morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something told me to answer. Olivia. His voice was unmistakable. "Wow," I said. "Thought I was blocked. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from." He cleared his throat. "But I need to talk to you. In person." I laughed. "You want to buy me coffee now?" "No." He sounded tired, defeated. "I want to apologize and ask for your help." That stopped me cold. "Help, meet me at the old place," he added. "The cafe down the block from the office. Tomorrow, noon." I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. When I walked into the cafe, the barista recognized me. "Hey, you're the AI girl, right? Saw the article about PulseLayer, pretty badass." I smiled. "Yeah, that's me." Brad was already seated by the window in the same booth where we'd once planned our first product roadmap. He looked different, smaller somehow, tired, hair messier, shirt slightly wrinkled. There was a laptop open in front of him and a half-drunk cup of coffee gone cold. I slid into the seat across from him. He looked up. "Thanks for coming." I just raised an eyebrow. "Let's not pretend this is friendly." He nodded slowly, folding his hands. "We're losing clients." "That's what happens," I said, "when the foundation of your product walks out the door." "I know. We've tried patching the system, but it's glitching more than ever. Our senior devs don't even understand half of it. Some of the modules you wrote, they're like black boxes." I sipped my drink. "You mean the black boxes I warned you not to break apart?" He swallowed. "Yes." I let the silence stretch, let him squirm. He finally leaned forward. "Look, I was wrong. About everything. About you. I let ego investors pressure." "Save it, Brad," I cut in. "You didn't let ego get in the way. Ego was the plan. You erased me because you thought no one would notice." He looked away. "I gave you everything," I continued, voice low but steady, "and you treated me like a feature to sunset. And now you want my help fixing the product you gutted." He nodded, looking more fragile than I'd ever seen him. I took a breath. "Why are you really here?" He hesitated. "Then the board wants to bring you back. As CTO." I blinked. "You're joking." "We need you," he said. "The product needs you. We're offering equity, full control of architecture, a new team, your team. Total autonomy." I stared at him. This was the same man who told me I was not scalable. The man who cut me out of my own code. The man who said we don't build around individuals and then built a house of cards on my logic. I leaned back. "Brad, you don't get it." He tilted his head. "What? I'm already CTO." His brow furrowed. "Of my company," I said. "PulseLayer. You know, the one you now license your core functionality from. The one you're paying quarterly fees to just to stay afloat." He was quiet. "I don't need your equity. I don't need your team." I built my team. From scratch. With engineers who actually respect me. I slid a napkin across the table. He looked down. I had written just one line. "You don't get to own me anymore." He stood to leave, but paused. "I really am sorry, Olivia." I looked at him one last time. "I believe you," I said, "but you're not the one who has to forgive you." I walked out of that cafe with no anger in my chest, no heat in my throat, just air, clean light earned. I wasn't a villain, I wasn't a victim, I was the architect, and I had finally reclaimed my name. That evening, I updated the PulseLayer landing page. At the top, under the brand name, I added a new tagline designed by the mind they tried to replace, and below that, founder and CTO Olivia Phan. No one could erase it now, not again, not ever. Sitting here now, looking back at the chaos, the betrayal, and the unexpected victories, I realize how much I've grown and how much this journey taught me beyond coding and contracts. When Brad called me expendable, I thought it was the end of the road. I thought I'd been discarded like a broken piece of software no longer useful. But it wasn't the end. It was a harsh, painful beginning. I learned that your work is part of your identity, but it doesn't define your worth. Losing Cortex Edge forced me to redefine what success meant. It wasn't about the title, the paycheck, or even the fancy perks. It was about respect for the work I poured my soul into and respect for myself as a creator and human being. I also learned the importance of protecting your intellectual property not just legally, but emotionally. Early on, I trusted too much. I believed loyalty alone would safeguard my contributions. It didn't. Documentation contracts and clear boundaries aren't just bureaucracy. They are your shield. Most importantly, I learned what it means to rise on your own terms. Starting PulseLayer wasn't just a business decision. It was an act of reclaiming agency. I took the code they tried to erase and transformed it into a beacon for transparency ethics and authenticity in a field that sorely needs it. The clients who came to us weren't just buying software, they were buying a promise that the brains behind the code were visible, accountable, and empowered. And I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger and resentment so you can move forward. When I faced Brad again, I didn't want to break him. I wanted to close that chapter with honesty and strength, not bitterness. Today, PulseLayer continues to grow. We're building tools that put people first. We're fostering a team culture where credit is shared and voices are amplified, where no one ever feels expendable. Every line of code I write now carries the lessons from the past, the caution, the strength, and the hope for a better future. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to take away, it's this. Never let anyone tell you that your work, your mind, or your spirit is expendable. Protect what you create. Know your worth. And when they try to erase you, build so brightly that they have no choice but to see you. Because sometimes the most powerful source code isn't the one running the servers, it's the code running inside you. And that code is unbreakable.